My name is Richard Johnson and I have been involved with Change Minds and its spin-off projects since May 2018. I started as a participant and am now project historian. Dr. Hills and the patients of the Norfolk County Asylum have become my life. I've derived great satisfaction and improved well-being from engaging with people from over a century ago. There are fewer differences than you might think.
The story of Dr. Hills and the patients he cared for has been reproduced as a theatrical performance called Dr. Hills' Casebook. You can find a film of the performance on the Restoration Trust YouTube channel. Construction of county asylums began slowly and then accelerated in the 1840s, so there were more than 100 in England and Wales until the process of shifting to community care began in the 1980s. The asylum, with provision for 100 patients, accepted its first intake in May 1814. Although Norfolk led the way with respect to building its asylum, it was the last in England and Wales to appoint a medical superintendent. The first medical superintendent tragically took his own life. His successor was Dr. William Charles Hills, who took up the post on the 18th of October 1861. The first entry in Dr. Hills' journal of his 26-year career at the asylum said, "I promise that no exertion shall be wanting in my part to promote the health and comfort of the patients, the well-being of all around me, and the careful superintendence of the asylum generally." He maintained these high standards for the rest of his working life. At this stage in 1861, the asylum was occupied by about 350 patients, 160 men and 190 women. Upon taking up his duties, Dr. Hills immediately drew the asylum committee's attention to the overcrowding and continued to raise this issue until consent was granted to build the auxiliary asylum in the 1870s. Upon Dr. Hills' resignation in 1887, the asylum population had doubled to 700, 300 men and 400 women. Until 1880, Dr. Hills had had only a single medical assistant. All the county asylums kept similar records, and those that have survived are held in archives throughout the UK. We are fortunate in Norfolk that we have such a large collection of asylum records, both in terms of volume and variety. These records include the minutes of the Asylum Committee, annual reports, inspection reports, registers and accounts. The jewels in the crown of the asylum records are the patient casebooks and the journals of Dr. Hills. The casebooks contain the medical notes of every patient who entered the asylum from 1846 onwards, although access to later records is restricted. After 1873, many of the individual records have photographs of the patient. Norfolk was one of the first asylums to do this. The casebooks give a detailed description of mental health care in the 19th century. They challenge our ideas about treatment in Victorian asylums, and that encourages us to think about the situation for people who live with mental health issues today. You could say that the history of the asylum will not be complete until every patient record has been transcribed, which is part of what you will be doing in Change Minds. The medical notes in the casebooks tell us about an individual's experience of the asylum and are a window into that person's life. They also tell us a lot about the life of the asylum. For example, we only know that some patients were treated with a Turkish bath because it's mentioned in individual patient records. As part of the process of recovery, and when they were well enough, patients were employed around the asylum, in the kitchen or laundry, on the garden and farm, or as craftsmen, or at needlework. Patients even helped care for those who were more infirm. The use of medication is notable by its relative absence. In fact, the cost of medication was far less than the asylum's bill for wine and spirits. Dr. Hills did not advocate for routine use of sedatives, but he did support their use, as he put it, to give calm sleep and repose to an excited patient, and thus promote recovery. At a time when the asylum contained 620 patients, only 20 were taking sedatives. We have talked about the casebooks, and now we come on to Dr. Hills himself, whose journals are another important source for understanding the workings of Norfolk Lunatic Asylum. Dr. Hills was born in 1828. He devoted his life to the medical care of the poor and spent 33 years working in pauper asylums, when other more prominent practitioners were quick to seek the money and fame of private practice. Dr. Hills was certainly not lacking in ability. He successively qualified as an apothecary, a surgeon and a physician. His influence spread far beyond Norfolk, as almost all the medical officers who served under him and stayed in mental health became medical superintendents of their own asylums. Dr. Hills was a compassionate, hard-working man and a competent, efficient manager with a dry sense of humour. He demonstrated a genuine concern for both his patients and his staff. He was a man of humanity, decency and duty. Dr. Hills resigned in 1887. In his letter of resignation, he wrote that, "Though the severance from the home of so many years where I have passed some of the happiest times of my life will be a wrench, yet the constant strain and anxiety of so prolonged a work compel me to relinquish my post." He had more than fulfilled his original promises made in his journal in 1861. He had indeed spared no exertion in looking after his patients and his staff, and he had run the asylum carefully and well. Even after his retirement, he continued to give free medical care to the poor and spent his summers at the City of London Asylum. He died in Norwich at the home of his daughter in 1902.
I studied Dr. Hills in the asylum for many years. It has been a remarkably satisfying experience, not only for the pure historical research, but for the engagement with the stories of people who are often forgotten or ignored. It is engagement not only with the past, but with fellow travellers on the challenging journey that is mental ill health.